So hi guys, welcome to the fifth episode of Learning Web Designs and Security with phpMyAdmin Security. So today marks the fifth episode since we started this series, and today we'll be working on patching the existing phpMyAdmin software which we upgraded in our previous WampServer installation, and of course fixing all the errors and issues that has occurred when we tried logging into our MySQL database using the default root username without a password. But before we get started, let's have a little recap of what we did last episode. So in our previous episode, we tried to install the WampServer locally on our Windows machine. And after we installed the software, we tried to demonstrate how you can upgrade, or should we say patch, your existing phpMyAdmin component that is in your web server software. So part of the reason why we demonstrated that process is because in the real life event, or should we say in real world events or activities, when you start building or hosting web applications for your clients or customers who consult your services, and you wish to have your own dedicated web hosting server, which you have built from the scratch, or should we say your client have their own existing web servers, you will be running into issues such as vulnerable components discovered in the wild from time to time, affecting these various software applications that are responsible for this web server to run efficiently and of course execute the various files that contains these various codes. So like we said in that video, we want to make you understand these various concepts of patching and fixing these various components, because oftentimes your web server software might not be vulnerable to any of the OWASP top 10, but let's say other components that make up the server might be vulnerable. Okay, so you have to learn how these various components works and what part of the web server application they reside, so that in the eventuality that you are hosting a live web server for your client and you offer security services as well, you can be able to patch these various components locally or one-on-one by yourself without waiting for the entire component that has both the patch of the vulnerable components running on your web server and your web server software to be released as a complete package by the maintainers of the web server software or application. Then after we're done with that, we also introduced the basic concept of HTML. In that video training, we talked about the basic structure of HTML documents, how an HTML document is structured, and how you can use the various tags to make the text or information displayed on your website look so cool, or should we say beautiful, to the various users or readers visiting your website using these various tags and components of HTML. So the essence of us breaking these stages of those trainings bit by bit and following the sequential flow is because at the end of the day, we want you to have a proper knowledge, not just a knowledge about coding web applications, but the basic structure, or should we say the foundation of everything that has to do with the entire structure of a web application. Then after we were done with talking about HTML, we promised that in our subsequent video, we'll be patching this vulnerable component, which we have upgraded, which is the phpMyAdmin version 5.2.2, which we installed. And that at the end of the day, we would show you how we corrected the errors that has to do with logging in with the default username root to our phpMyAdmin MySQL database without a password. So that training was a complete training and well-enhanced detail that every web developer, or should we say aspiring web developer, should know. So that was just all we did in that previous episode. And we were able to round up that episode successfully with every of the information we intend to convey to you, our various viewers, regarding web application designs and security. So on today's episode, we'll be talking something different to round up that series, which has to do with fixing the issues we encountered during the upgrade of the phpMyAdmin. So the course outline for today is that we have 3 subjects we would be able to tackle and resolve today. The first subject is that we are going to be able to fix the password issue impacting the upgraded phpMyAdmin. Then after we're done, we'll move on to resolving the cookie encryption key that has to do with the MySQL database. So basically, this cookie encryption key has to do with encrypting your session whenever you try to access MySQL database. So in the previous installation, all this has been fixed because it's an entire package that came with the version of WampServer we installed. But knowing that the WampServer runs an obsolete phpMyAdmin, we decided to patch ours, and of course patching that version gave rise to the issues of this cookie encryption key being missing in the latest update we patched. So that we'll be resolving it here today. And lastly, we'll be fixing the phpMyAdmin storage configuration issues. So this storage configuration has to do with the default configuration that has to run phpMyAdmin storage configuration for it to function properly. So this issue, we get to experience it after we have solved the password, the cookie encryption. Then we saw this issue that it's another issue that arose in the process of resolving this. So we intend to also complete that today. And with that, we'll be rounding up everything that has to do with the phpMyAdmin 5.2.2 upgrade and show you how you can log in without a password. And of course, ensuring that everything works fine before we move on to our subsequent training in our next episode. So with that being said, let's get started. So before we get started, the first thing we need to do is that we have to run our WampServer. Now, once our WampServer is up and running, the next thing we need to do is that we want to access the MySQL console to be able to set up the configuration for the password for the root user on the MySQL database. So here we come, we left click, then we move to MySQL and we click MySQL console. So once we click it, this interface will pop up. You either click OK or you hit enter on your keyboard. So we now click OK here. After clicking OK, this is going to execute the mysql.exe software from the directory of the WampServer binary directory and MySQL directory, and further to the MySQL version which we are running, then bin and the software itself. So now here we don't want to use a password to access the phpMyAdmin. So all we need to do is that we hit enter on our keyboard, and this is going to launch the MySQL console. Now, once we are able to have this MySQL console, we need to first of all run the first command, which has to do with the root user access. Okay, so what do? We just come here, we say in capital letter alter, we say user, then we say root, okay, then we say at localhost, okay, then we say identified by, okay, then we put an empty space here and semicolon. Now this identified by, it has to do with a password. Assuming we want to put a password for this, we can just put a string of characters in between that. But since we want to make this user to have a passwordless access to the MySQL database, all we just need to do is to leave it empty and we hit enter. And that query has successfully executed. Now for this to take effect, or should we say for this to be able to, perform efficiently, we use another command called flush, okay, privileges. And we put a semicolon and we hit enter. You have an error in this. So you can see because we spelled the privileges wrongly, that's why we have this error. Okay, so we say flush, okay, and we say privilege. Good. So everything works fine. Okay. Now, once this is done, the next thing we want to do is that we want to go to the WampServer directory, look for the apps, which is the current phpMyAdmin, and configure a file known as config.int. Okay. So how do we access that part? We can Windows R and we go to C, WampServer 64, apps, and of course the current phpMyAdmin directory we are running. So if you don't know the current version of your phpMyAdmin, you can left click here and you come here. You can see this is the version we're running. Okay. So we click OK. Good. Now this file, okay, we come here, we copy this and we paste. Okay, we have a problem. Okay, so we come here, we copy this file, okay, and we paste it here. Then we rename the file, okay, to config int, and we remove this copy and we hit enter. So once we do this, then we right click and we edit with Notepad. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is that you want to look for a code line that has to do with allow no password. Okay, so here we are saying this here to allow no password. Okay, so here it says CFG allow no password. So previously it was false. So make sure that this is true. So what we're trying to say is that this configuration file, whenever the user tries to access this, phpMyAdmin, it should ensure that it doesn't accept password. So if we turn this to false, the user will be required to give a password. But since we turn it to true, whenever the user tries to log in, the user will not be required to provide a password. Now, one more thing, we added this newly here, okay, to ensure that the user does not require a password. Then the next thing is that we copy this, okay, and we turn this place to what? And here, sorry, we turn this to the user. Okay, then the value is what? Root. Okay, so what we are trying to say is that this configuration for this server should request for the username root, but for the password, no password. So we save this file. Now, once we have successfully saved this file, we come here, we restart all services, okay? So that this will take effect on the phpMyAdmin. Now, once that is done, we can now access our phpMyAdmin by reloading it. And you can see it says depreciated, okay? So it means that the previous configuration has been depreciated. So we can reload again. Good. So if we type root right now, and you can see we're able to log in. And that is how you configure and set up this issue that has to do with password if you do not want the user root to use a password. And as you can see here, the user at localhost, it's here. Okay. So after we have done this, we had two other issues. So the first one has to do with the configuration file needs a valid cookie encryption key. Okay. So a temporary key was automatically generated for you. So that's just a temporary key, which of course subsequently cannot, provide the encryption which this database needs. Okay. Then we have this other issue that has to do with storage configuration. So now let's resolve this issue that has to do with this configuration file for the cookie encryption. So we log out again from here. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is that we have to assess the part where our current PHP is running and which version of PHP we're running. So if you don't know the version of the PHP you're running, you can come here again, you left click. You can see this is a PHP. We have PHP 8.4. That's the current version of the PHP we're running. Okay. So we now need to find this part. Okay. To configure this part first in the system variable. Then of course, after we're done configuring this part in the system variable, we do other configurations to get that Blowfish key encryption resolved. So what do is that we come here again. We go to WampServer this time around. Now, once we're there, we go to binary. Then we go to PHP. Remember, the current PHP we're running is this. We have multiple PHP versions installed, but this is the current one we're running, right? Good. So the next thing we do is that we click this. Now, this is the part, okay? So we copy this part. Then we come here, we look for environment variables. Now, once we're able to access the environment variables, we just click on this. Then we come to system variables, okay? We look for path. This is path, okay? Then we click edit. Now we click new and we put the path to our current PHP version we're running on our WampServer, and we click OK, and we click OK, and we click OK. Now, once that is done, the next thing we need to do is this. We have to check the version of the PHP we're running, okay, to make sure that everything is working fine. So we'll say php-v. Good. Now, once we check this, you can see this error here, okay? So first of all, this version of Xdebug is obsolete. It's not a latest version. And also you can see it's trying to load from the E drive, whereas our WampServer is running from the C drive. So these are the two issues that has to do with this failed loading debug issues, okay? So to download the latest Xdebug issues, you can come here. Then you download the latest binary release, depending on the operating system you're running. In this case, we're running Windows, right? So you download the latest binary release on your PC, because this binary release, we will be making use of it to correct that issues that has to do with the bug. So if you don't know the version of the PHP you're running, once more, you come here again, you check, you can see it's here. Okay, good. Now, once you downloaded that file, this is where you have the file here. We already downloaded the file. Okay, it's okay. It's a safe file. The website is a trusted website recommended by PHP. But if you have doubts about this file, you can upload it to VirusTotal to scan the file. So we have done downloading this file. The next thing we need to do right now is that we want to look for the Zen extension directory. If you come here, you can see here, it tells us it's using the Zen extension, this part, okay? So we can just come here and copy this, okay? Then we go to Windows R and we put it, okay? And you hit OK. Good. So you can see here, we're running an older version. And if you see our downloads here, you can see we have the 3.4.5, okay? So we can copy this. Now we've copied this here, we can delete this old one. We don't have use for it anymore. So this is the latest one, right? Now, once we're done with this, the next thing we need to do is that we need to go back to that Z extension, okay? And get the full path, okay, of the latest Zend binary file which we downloaded, okay? So this latest Zend binary file which we downloaded is this one, okay? So our full path becomes this. Okay, then you can see this one, this Xdebug. You can see it picked the current version which we just downloaded, this, right? So you just copy this, okay? I'll tell you why we need to copy this. So once you're done copying that, the next thing you need to do is that you have to go back to the this directory. Then you look for php.ini, this one. This is the configuration file. You edit with Notepad. Now, once you edit with Notepad, you want to look for Z extension. So we find Z extension. Okay, so you can say find next. Now, this is the first one we saw. So you need to correct this from E to C. Okay, now once you've done correct this from E to C, the next thing you find the second one, which is this one. Okay, now you can see here we have E, right? So this is wrong. We need to correct it by putting this one, which we copied. Okay, and remember it's a /. Okay. Now, once we're done correcting this, we can now save. Okay, we save the file. Okay. Now, to ensure that this has worked efficiently, we can come here and we restart all services. Okay, and we can close this as well. Now, once our WampServer is back online, we just come here and say php-v. And you can see right now we can get our PHP version, and of course, no more errors. Okay. Now we can go back again and reload this. You will see this depreciated. So it means the previous configuration is depreciated. Reload again. And we put root. And we log in. Good. Now, this is the Blowfish configuration issues, right? So now we need to generate a strong encryption key for these cookie issues. So how do we generate this? It's very simple. We go back here. We use this command. We say php -r echo. Okay. Then we say bin to hex. So binary to hexadecimal. Okay. Then we say generate random bytes. We say 16. So this is the maximum. 32 bits of characters is the maximum this can accept. Okay. And we enclose this. So if you try to put 32 here, which means it's going to generate 64, and you configure it in the Blowfish, it's going to tell you error that the maximum this can accept is 32. So we hit enter. Now a random encryption key has been generated for us. So we can copy this. Okay. Once we copy this, the next thing we want to do is that we want to go back and assess the part where this Blowfish error is coming from. So we go back again to our config.inc, which we previously, set up to assess the Blowfish command line, and of course insert this encryption key there. So once again we go to Windows R, then we go to the current phpMyAdmin we're running. Then we edit this file again with Notepad. So now let's look for Blowfish. So you can see there's no secret key, and here it's telling us that you must fill in this for cookie auth. Okay. So if there's no secret key here, that's why we're having this issue. So the key which we have generated, we just insert it here and we save the file. Now, once we're done, we can close all these files. Okay. Then we come here, we'll restart all services. So the essence of restarting all the services for everything to take effect, all the changes we've made so far should take effect on these various files. Now, once our WampServer is back online, we can go back and let's reload this. We should see depreciated. Of course, reload again. Then we type root and we hit enter. Boom. And as you can see, we have resolved the encryption key issues. Okay. And even if we change the various template, you can see there's no issues anymore. So now we're only left with this, storage issue. Okay. Now, how do you resolve this? You can click here. Okay. But there is a very easy way to resolve this issue. We need to access the MySQL database itself and access operations. Then from operations, we resolve the issue. So to resolve this issue is very simple. We just come here, we click MySQL, you select operations. Then you can see this here, right? You click on find out why. Then to resolve this, we just say create. And as you can see, everything has been created. Now, if we go back to home and we log in, you can see this is, here, right? Then we click on find out why and we click on create. Then all this has been created, right? Then we go back to home. As you can see, everything is done. Now, once this is done, in that config file, we're supposed to uncomment certain information in the file and set up a configuration. Okay. So if we go back again, you can see it's done. So first of all, we did the configuration from the MySQL. Then we came back here. We now did this. But if we had done this by configuration, it would mean that we have to uncomment certain informations and of course, doing some command execution. And this is how you patch your phpMyAdmin, resolve the password issue that has to do with MySQL database, and also resolving the storage issue to ensure that your database works efficiently. And if we log out again and we log in, you can see we don't have that issue anymore. We can also log out again and we can exit and we launch our WampServer again. So if we reload and we say login, you can see everything works fine. So we can also launch our console. If you want to type, any SQL command here, you can type it here. And we can also create a new database, and tells us what's the database name. We can just say phpMyAdmin security, score security. Okay, and we say, we can just leave the default and we just say create. Okay, and as you can see, we have the database here. So we can create how many columns. We want to create 5, 6. So these are like table names. So we can say for users, and we can say 6, create. Good. So these columns here we can put for username, specify the type. We specify for phone number and so on. So let's just ignore this, okay? We're not going to use this. Okay. So basically, there are no tables found because we have not created any table. And as you can see, we've been able to resolve this issue. And if we log out and we log in again, you can see our database still exists. So we have successfully walked you through the entire steps of fixing the phpMyAdmin patching of the version 5.2.2. Also, we've been able to show you how to access the MySQL console on WampServer to configure the root user not requiring a password to access the MySQL database. And furthermore, we have been able to show you how to make changes on the config.inc.php that reflects the latest patch, which is accessed via the latest patch of the phpMyAdmin. Then once we're done with that, we're also able to show you how to access the environment variables and make changes to the xdebug error file that you experience when you run this various patch to the latest version. Then after we're done with that, we're also able to demonstrate how you can generate the bin to hex for the Blowfish encryption, and of course using that encryption key to template in our config.inc.php file. Then lastly, we're able to resolve the phpMyAdmin configuration storage issues by first of all accessing the MySQL database to create it, then going back to the main interface and recreating that. So that was resolved easily because we do not want to show you how to run this using the command prompt or making changes to the file, which will also make a little bit complications for you who are not too technical to patch various components that has to do with your server software running on your server hardware based on the operating system Windows, if that's what you're using to run your various websites or web pages. And that sums it up for this week's and this month's episode on web development and security with phpMyAdmin security. Take your time to watch the entire video. Everything is very simple. The demonstration is a very straightforward steps. And if we have the time during the week or before next weekend, we can update these various steps in our GitHub repository. It's not a promise, but we will try our best to make sure we meet up with this comment by updating our file solutions on our GitHub repository. So we want to say thank you for watching the series and sorry for the hiccups here and there. We're trying to run these comments and having some side distraction as well. So once again, thank you for watching and see you next week on another episode of Coding with phpMyAdmin Security, and bye for now.